Meve's ears caught the sound of a ruckus coming from the camp.
Thief! Inglet! A pox upon you all!
It was her quartermaster hurling oaths at the peasants she had freed from the Nilfgaardian slave convoy. A few had stolen supplies under the cover of darkness and escaped into the woods. Terror and dread gripped the other freed prisoners. Meve mulled over what to do with them, and Reynard, as always, offered some advice.
"'Tis high time they went off on their own, your grace. They are too great a hindrance. They slow our march, divert our soldiers from more important tasks. And now this."
Gascon was listening to their conversation. Meve shot him a questioning look.
I opposed taking them in. So, for consistency, I now oppose forcing them to leave. We made their miserable lives our responsibility, did we not? Well then, that is a burden we cannot simply shrug off.
Let us not mince words. We cast off these peasants now, they shall die.
Meve said in the end.
Let them stay. But I want them watched. They cause any more trouble, military justice they shall face. Understood?
The freed prisoners sighed with relief. The infantrymen assigned to watch over them, however, grumbled their disapproval of the Queen's decision.
"'Tis an army, not a shelter,"
they said. Meve's ears surely caught the complaint. But the Queen had never let the opinions of others guide her in such matters, trusting only her own judgment.
Not liking the looks of this,
Gascon said, furrowing his brow. Meve followed his gaze. Before them, beside the road, stood a hut with a scorched thatch roof.
Why?
Hut's abandoned, yet dried fruit and mushrooms hang from the eaves. Famine raging all around and no one's been tempted. I'd send a scout if I were you.
The Queen did as Gascon suggested, and sent 3 infantrymen to reconnoitre. They entered the hut and found only silence, that was soon broken by a blood-curdling growl. The soldiers ran out at full speed, tripping over their own legs. Meve drew her sword, convinced a horde of neckers or ghouls would soon attack. But her fears proved unfounded. Instead of monsters, out of the hut came a shaggy dog, a torn scrap of fabric clutched in its teeth.
"Milady,"
one of the soldiers began, his face red with embarrassment and his hands covering a hole in his breeches.
"Was dark as a well inside, and that hound, it jumped out at us all of a sudden, biting it and snapping."
Bad boy,
Gascon said with a smile, then pulled a hunk of dried sausage from his bag. Bought by this generous offering, the dog calmed down at once. Further examination showed the dog was the hut's only resident. Like many others in Aedirn, its owners had disappeared without a trace. Their loyal mutt still guarded the premises, waiting for his master's return.
Let's take him with us,
Gascon said.
Otherwise, he'll die here, of his own hunger or someone else's.
A watchful sentry like this could prove useful in our camp,
said the Queen.
Fine, he can join. But he shall need a name.
How about Reynard?
Proposed Gascon. A cheeky grin smeared across his face.
That way he'll come when you call, sit on command and always be a heel.
Always heel, that is.
"Watch your words,"
said Reynard, hand tightly gripping the hilt of his sword.
"or you'll learn I'm not at all as tame as you believe."
Enough, both of you. That's an order. As for you...
The Queen took a good look at the dog, who still had a scrap of fabric in his teeth.
Since it seems you've a taste for the cloth of the nether regions, I dub you... Knickers. Will that do?
The dog wagged its tail vigorously, as if thoroughly pleased with its new name. Meve's company marched off, a furry new recruit richer. Meve and her companions neared the Moulderwood, a dense, ancient forest of trees whose tangled branches had witnessed the conjunction of the spheres. It was not until King Vidamont's day that a road was finally carved through the primeval thicket, significantly shortening the journey from Rosberg to Aldersberg.
Even when peace reigns, danger rules this road.
Rayla said.
Now no one dares travel it.
At the edge of the wood by the road stood an enormous willow. Its branches swept down to cover its trunk, looking for all the world like long tresses shrouding a woman's face. Meve had an ill premonition. She did not like the sickly sweet aroma wafting from this tree, nor the metallic buzzing of insect wings. She sent a scout to investigate. He drew aside the drooping branches and stumbled back. There were men bound to the tree, covered in sap oozing from gashes in its trunk. Its heavy scent had attracted swarms of insects, flies, wasps, bees and beetles. They seethed over the bound men, crawling in and out of their ears and nostrils.
Eldain welcomes us to his wood,
Rayla whispered. Meve stepped towards the tree and saw the men stuck to it were all still alive. Those the elves had caught recently writhed and howled for rescue. Those hanging longer merely followed the queen with half-crazed, bloodshot eyes.
Well? Are you to stand there all day?
Meve screamed to her dumbstruck Lyrians.
Free them! At once!
Her soldiers needed no more prompting and set about sawing at the ropes with their blades. As soon as they had freed the first captive, before even a word of thanks could be uttered, a flaming streak soared through the air and stuck in the tree. The oozing resin burst into flames, engulfing the prisoners as well as the soldiers who had come to their aid. Elder speech battle cries rang out from the woods as elven warriors launched their attack.
Nilfgaardian!
It's a trap!
Cried Reynard.
Defend the queen!
Keep your heads in the fight! They'll seek to blind us with shock and awe! Don't let them regroup! Finish off the wounded!
The battle done, Meve surveyed the carnage, her breath still ragged. The thick stench of blood, sap, and ash she sucked in made her stomach churn and head swoon.
The Scoia'tael. I'd heard of their cruelty, but...
The queen said, sheathing her sword.
But never have I countenanced a thing like this.
Black Rayla, who had just extracted her blade from between an elven gorilla's ribs, smiled darkly.
Worst is yet to come, my lady.
The queen regrouped her forces and marched into the Moulderwood. The Lyrians sang none of their usual marching songs. Instead, they walked in silence, eyes darting constantly to their flanks.
Hear that? Nightingales. Unmindful of war, they sing on.
Those are no birds, my lady. Just Scoia'tael scouts use animal cries to communicate. Tell the men to hold to the road, my lady. Anyone wanders in the trees, they don't come out.
What was that?
Meve asked Reynard, who rode beside her.
A scream. A man's, I think.
Need to investigate. Gather a few men and we ride. Quickly!
The screaming came from a small settlement. When Meve rode up to its farmhouses, her horse reared and neighed in terror. Necrophages swarmed all around. The monsters surrounded a few Nilfgaardians who were trying, with no success, to chase them off with torches. Reynard swept his gaze over the carnage and said,
They cannot stave them off, and their armor is too heavy for them to flee.
Meve was uncertain at first how to act. But when she saw ghouls snatch one of the Nilfgaardians and rip him to shreds, she drew her sword.
No one deserves such a death. Not even a Nilfgaardian. Follow me! Lower your weapons! We're here to rescue you!
Let the ghouls eat him, I say!
Silence! The Queen has made her decision. It worked, Your Grace. The monsters flee.
The Lyrians and the Nilfgaardians fought the monsters side by side, a united force. But when the last necrophage fell, the soldiers immediately returned to their respective divisions. Meve's soldiers looked at the invaders askance, uncertain what would happen next. Suddenly, one of the Nilfgaardians broke ranks and fell to his knees.
Your Grace, I know you have no reason to trust us, but we are not enemies. We hail from Geso. A land Nilfgaard conquered and made its province. We did not ask to fight in this war by force. We were conscripted.
The soldier hefted his sword by the blade and handed it, hilt first, to the queen.
We yearned for a way to desert, and we have found it. Your Grace, allow us to join your army. We long for the Empire's defeat every bit as much as you do.
Meve helped the kneeling soldier to his feet.
The enemy of Nilfgaard is my friend, no matter who he is or whence he hail.
The Lyrians were clearly displeased with their queen's decision. The black-clad deserters from Geso would need to earn their trust. Meve's path took her to the village of Eikenfurt. Unlike most settlements in the area, not a single human dwelled here. Instead, only elves and dwarves sat on its porches and stared at the passing Lyrians with clear aversion. Not a single greeting was extended to their allies in arms. Not a single peddler tried to hawk their wares. The only sound was that of snapping shutters and slamming doors.
Something's amiss,
Rayla said, furrowing her brow.
Order a halt, my lady, and give me a moment to look around.
You've a quarter of an hour,
Meve said as she dismounted.
and not a moment more.
The queen sat in the shade of a large pear tree. She shut her eyes and listened to the chirping of crickets in the grass, savouring a rare moment of relaxation. But the calm did not last. Within moments, one of her scouts returned, a certain Sergeant Niedermere. Tears streamed down his weathered, scar-pocked face.
Lady, come with us, please. You'll need to see this for yourself.
The sergeant led her to the still smouldering remains of a mill. Her soldiers were picking things out from the ashes. When she got closer, she realized in horror they were human skulls, some no larger than apples.
Tell the villagers to gather by the well,
The queen said in a strained voice.
or be executed.
The elves and dwarves attempted no denials. They admitted Eldain and his Scoia'tael had helped them round up all the humans in their village, march them into the mill, then set it aflame.
They stole our lands, defiled our names, beat us, murdered us in bloodthirsty pogroms.
Shouted one of the dwarves.
They had it coming to them. Got their comeuppance, I'd say.
Meve was no stranger to the cruelty of war, but the enormous evil she found in Eikenfurt overwhelmed her. She felt a terrible weight on her chest, found it hard to draw breath, and her head spun. She felt she could hear the cries of humans being burned alive.
Ma'am,
Whispered Reynard.
you must pronounce something.
Or simply turn the matter over to me, Your Grace.
Rayla interrupted.
I know what to do.
You know what you deserve,
Meve said.
but my soldiers are neither murderers nor executioners, and you are not my subjects. So I shall have you escorted to Rosberg. Let the authorities there mete out justice. With a noose, I hope.
The queen chose a dozen soldiers and tasked them with seeing the non-humans of Eikenfurt tried by an Aedirnian judge. In doing so, she weakened her forces, but saved herself and her Lyrians from having to carry out a bloody sentence by their own hand. On the edge of the Moulderwood there stood a small village, Crumhorn. The hamlet was surrounded by a high palisade, while the villagers carried makeshift weapons, flails, axes, and nail-studded planks. Life as the Scoia'tael's neighbors was clearly not easy. While her men rested, Meve approached two of the villagers. They lowered their heads in respect and fidgeted nervously with their shirt hems.
My lady, reckon you ought to know. Elves meeting traders in the woods at night. Buy swords, herbs.
Rayla, who had overheard the conversation, twisted her mouth in a hateful scowl.
Hawkers stink worse than vermin. Willing to help murderers for coin. Please, milady, we must find them and punish them. You, talk! Where do these meetings take place?
The peasants looked at each other. One scratched his head, the other toed the sand. Finally, one of them blurted out,
Could tell you, milady, yes, but only for gold.
I see I'm dealing with shrewd men of trade. Fine. Your fee.
Meve took a few coins from her pouch and tossed them on the ground. The peasants dropped on all fours and started snatching the coins from the grass, ignoring the contemptuous gaze of the Queen's soldiers.
Them orcas wheeled them goods to the old fishing hut north of here. Scoia'tael come a-crawling from the woods, the first crow of the cockerel.
The Queen told her men to prepare to fight the Scoia'tael and their abettors. Black Rayla sat on a fallen trunk and sharpened her sword. The grinding of stone on blade sounded a grim promise. Meve arrived at the hut the villagers claimed to be the meeting point for the Scoia'tael and the hawkers. Torchlight flickered amidst the trees, and she heard the sound of hushed voices.
Your Grace,
Whispered Rayla.
they're in our grasp. We must act quickly if all the elves retreat into the woods.
Worry not, Rayla.
The Queen said, patting her on the back.
I shan't let a chance like this slip. Attack!
The Lyrians rushed out of the woods at the unsuspecting elves and merchants. Moments later, the sound of combat filled the dark wood.
Hawker scum! There's but one penalty for trading with elves.
Meve pulled off a rare trick. She laid a trap for the Scoia'tael in their own woods. The surrounded elves fought to the bitter end, choosing death over human captivity. Meve cracked open the hawkers' chests and stared at a mass of tangled oakum. Perplexed, she dug deeper and found the real goods hidden underneath. Bolts with entrail-pureeing hooks, leg-snapping bear traps, and incurable poisons.
Instruments of cruelty,
Said Reynard, looking over the chest's contents.
designed to deliver maximum pain and a prolonged death.
Gascon did not share in the general gloom. He reached for one of the arrows and balanced it in his hand with curiosity.
A corpse is a corpse. It cares not how it became one. And these marvels, oh, my lads could do fine things with them.
The ends justify the means.
Meve said curtly as she grabbed a weapon from one of the chests. Her soldiers followed suit and equipped themselves with hawker arms. Soon enough, the elves would feel the pain they'd hoped to inflict on others. Meve was discussing some matter with Gascon when a scout approached. His blood-streaked uniform revealed the matter to be urgent, so the Queen cut short her conversation and requested a report.
We were scouting, milady, and we found a cave entrance. Small scattering of elves guarding it, but we took them right out.
Gascon scratched his chin.
I'd wager 10 Novigrad crowns there are more Scoia'tael squirreled away inside. We strike afore they know we've snuffed out their guards, we might well catch them by surprise. But we must act quickly.
Then let us act. Gather some men and prepare them for an attack. But keep quiet.
The Lyrians crept into the cave. They moved carefully, noiselessly even, avoiding notice for quite a while. Nevertheless, elven warriors soon came pouring out of a side cavern.
For Vortuan!
They're not backing down! Must be something of value to them here!
They resisted to the very end.
When the Lyrians broke the elven ranks, Meve was convinced their foe would retreat and regroup. But to her surprise, the Scoia'tael fought to the bitter end. She concluded there must have been something truly valuable hidden in that cave. As Meve entered the next chamber, her nose caught the stink of blood, pus, and urine. Then she understood. The elves were using the cave as a field hospital. Wounded fighters lay by the cavern walls. They made no attempt to defend themselves, nor to beg, nor to make peace with the gods. They merely watched the Lyrians calmly, with stark contempt.
Milady,
Whispered Rayla.
you saw what the Scoia'tael are capable of. What they do to humans. They would have no mercy for...
Reynard, usually calm, could not hold back and cut Rayla off.
What, pray, do you suggest? That we murder the wounded?
The warrior responded in a whisper, slowly emphasizing her words.
I suggest you leave. Leave me and my men. We'll take care of the rest.
Meve looked the warrior in the eyes and was terrified by what she saw.
No, Rayla. We shall not touch them. Do you understand?
Rayla was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded and left the cave. Reynard followed her with his gaze, hand on hilt.
Reynard, listen to me. You are to keep a close watch on Rayla until we are at least a day's ride from this cave. If she separates from the column, if she tries to double back, I wish to hear about it. Do you understand?
Reynard nodded. Despite the day's victory, they left the cave in a somber mood.
Have we not passed this way before?
Scouts say no, Your Grace. They mark the trees.
Elves could have erased the marks, or left new ones where we've yet to tread. Best to follow the sun. Only way not to lose your bearings.
Meve was riding at the head of the caravan when Black Rayla rode up and leaned towards her. She spoke in a whisper, a hand shielding her mouth.
Your Grace, I've something important to tell you. Yet you can't show anything to miss. Look straight ahead. Make no sudden moves.
Meve nodded slightly and waited for her to continue.
Scoia'tael scouts in the woods, watching us. Eldain's near here somewhere, preparing his attack.
So what do you propose?
Asked the Queen, her gaze fixed on the road ahead.
Let him catch us out in the open. We're sitting ducks. But there are ruins nearby, an elven cemetery. We can find cover behind its walls.
Meve was accustomed to discussing important decisions with all her advisors, but she knew there was no time for consultation now. She had to trust Black Rayla's advice, and so without further delay issued the appropriate orders. Meve's retinue reached the cemetery before dusk. Her soldiers knocked down the marble statuary and piled them into barricades, while scouts took up positions outside the walls to watch for the foe's approach. When the sun set, the woods exhaled the heat of the day, and a thick fog soon arose. Out of the mist stepped Reynard's scouts, bound and pushed forward by elves. One of the Scoia'tael, a sturdy elf with long hair, stood by the cemetery wall and cried,
I am Eldain. I would speak to Meve.
I am she. Speak.
Cadmil and Kedvagenvid Renna. This place is of great import to us, the Enshe. I would tell you of its monuments, of the weeping Ensevern, carved by 3 generations of sculptors, or of the alabaster relief of King Kelad, so beautiful even the birds would gather to admire it. But I see your men have found our memorials, and, in the way of Dwan, destroyed them without a second thought. I cannot say this comes as a surprise. You've already shown the gods molded you from the basest of matter.
Get to the point, Eldain.
So I shall. As you certainly know, the necropolis is surrounded. Soon there shall be a battle. But it is unseemly to fight in a cemetery. So I ask you to come out into the open.
And surrender our tactical advantage.
I suspected a matter so impractical as respecting the dead would mean nothing to you, Dwan. So I submit one more argument. The lives of the soldiers you sent to spy. If you leave the cemetery, I shall set them free. They will fight at your side. If not, I shall kill them, here and now.
Milady, don't listen to him. He can't be trusted.
Rayla, those are good men. Fabian, Gerrit, Matthias, they've served me for a decade. They'd crawl through 7 hells for their queen. They do not deserve such a death.
I accept your conditions.
Your Grace, I beg you.
Soldiers! We march into the field!
Eldain clasped his hands in thanks. Then in a swift, almost careless movement, slit the throat of the scout standing nearest to him.
You should have listened to Rayla, Your Grace. We elves truly cannot be trusted. Spala!
I warned you. Now we've lost the advantage.
I'm sorry, Your Grace. I take full responsibility.
Bleta! Bina!
After a long, bloody battle, Eldain's unit was destroyed, and Eldain himself sat at Meve's feet, defeated and dying.
To die in a cemetery. Something amusing in it, wouldn't you say?
I am surprised you are in the mood for humor.
All my tears I shed years ago. My family killed in a massacre aimed at eradicating our race. Senseless. Utterly senseless. Reyna, we have lost. Me, my Scoia'tael, the Enshe. We shall vanish from this earth. Your grandchildren will know us in fairy tales only. I know I deceived you, but lay my bones to rest in a grave. Let me part this world with dignity. Aeger Dregared.
Oh, please! How dare he? Look, he laughs, Your Grace! This dog should rot in an open field. Need I mention the willow, the many strung from it, the many burned alive?
Mercy you don't deserve, Eldain. I shall leave you where you lie, where rats will gnaw at your bones.
In your boots, I would do the same. Vasse derad, ep agen.
Meve gave the order to march that very night, not waiting for the day to break. She wished to leave behind as soon as possible the Moulderwood and the rotting elven remains littering Kedva-Genvid Cemetery. Black Rayla rode at the head of the caravan to the Queen's right, a satisfied smile playing on her lips.
Oh, at last. I'd begun to think this wood had no end.
And I thought bandits knew their way round a wood.
We do. Around those not brimming with elves armed to teeth.
The burning fields and orchards spewed thick black smoke, turning day into darkest night. Riding in the middle of her caravan, Meve could see neither its head nor its rear. Reynard ordered the men to keep formation and march in silence.
Eyes open, fore and aft. The foe might well use these conditions to spring a trap.
When a scout's shrill horn cut through the silence, Meve immediately galloped to the front of the column. She found herself in a pile of red-hot coals that had once been peasants' huts.
What the devil happened here?
Bodies lay amid the ashes, barefoot men in nightshirts as if caught in their sleep. Meve deemed them yet more victims of the black-clad invaders, but Gascon had another interpretation.
Look at the arrows. Imperial issue. Not hardly. Nor are they the type the Scoia'tael favour. And the tracks in the mud, the attackers fought not in formation, but man to man. Bandits. It must have been.
Reynard, standing next to him, nodded in agreement.
Gascon can be relied on here. After all, he knows of what he speaks.
An uncomfortable silence fell over the group, ending only when Meve ordered the scouts to determine the direction of the bandits' tracks. They returned to report the killers were hiding somewhere to the north. The scouts reported the bandits who attacked the village that night now occupied a fort the Aedirnians had hastily abandoned during their retreat.
They'll have crossbows, arbalest, ballistae. The bandits are armed to the teeth.
What's more, according to the local folk, they had a witch among them. In light of these reports, Meve's advisors debated whether it was worth risking a fight with the brigands.
Let's call it as it is.
Gascon said.
The game's not worth the candle.
Game?
Rayla said, struggling to swallow her anger.
They slaughtered an entire village. We cannot let them get away.
The stage seemed set for a long debate, when Meve pounded her fist on the table.
I am a queen, for God's sakes. I shall not cower before common rogues, even if the entire conclave of mages stands with them. Reynard, have the men prepare their arms.
Reynard saluted and left the tent. If one had seen him then, he would have sworn the grizzled soldier smiled to himself, beaming with pride in his ruler.
Did you hear that? A kind of incantation.
Something's not right. They should be dead with those wounds. We must find a gap in the fortifications. The fort is ours, Your Grace.
They battled long and hard to take the fort. Meve could have sworn she saw bandits stalking its ramparts. Bandits who moments before had taken a bolt to the head. By all rights, a mortal wound.
What the devil is going on here?
She swore as she took cover behind her shield. The secret was unraveled only after the battle's conclusion. Meve's soldiers dragged before her a grey-haired woman in coloured robes. The aura radiating from her left no doubt. They had fought a sorceress. It was her healing spells that enabled the bandits to hold off their attack for so long.
What is your name, sorceress?
Ispel of Tretogor.
I take it you did not keep company with bandits willingly?
Not at all. They kidnapped me and forced me to aid them.
Forced? I do not understand. As a woman fluent in the arcana of magic, you could have freed yourself with little effort.
True, I could have. But I would have had to kill, and I swore never to use my talents to harm another.
Not even in self-defense?
Not even then.
Then you live in truly unfortunate times. War rages all around. You cannot hide from it.
So be it. Then I must entrust myself to the care of the gods.
Or a passing queen.
You stand before Meve, by divine right ruler of Lyria and Rivia. We seek the lord of these lands, Demavend.
Oh, forgive me for not recognizing you, Your Grace. You do not look like a ruler. More like a mercenary.
Nor do you look like a sorceress.
True, milady. Forgive me. I meant no offense.
I accept your apology, and would gladly welcome you into our ranks. Truth be told, a skilled worker of magic would prove most useful to us.
Thank you, my lady. But you must know, an army is no place for me.
Should you wish it not, you needn't fight. We have many civilians among our ranks who
do their part in the slaughter. Indirect guilt is enough.
My soldiers do not slaughter, they fight.
Lofty words, but the result is the same. Piles of corpses.
Well, a bandit I am not. I shall not force you. Reynard, prepare the men to march on.
Of course, but if I may, perhaps Xavier might have a look at the war machines we captured. He may find some parts of use.
Meve followed Reynard's suggestion. Xavier went to work.
Yes, Your Grace.
Gods. What happened to him?
He was in Rosberg when the stronghold fell. Nearly burned alive.
How are you healing him?
The medics recommended regular poultices of dog's tallow, but whether they've any effect...
Of course they've no effect. For such wounds. How he must suffer.
In the day he reveals nothing, but at night one awakes to hear him sob with pain. You see? I need healers.
I shall go with you. But never shall I use magic to take a life. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, you have put it quite plain, and rather bluntly.
Forgive me, Your Grace. It has been long since I played the host. I forget the custom.
Your spells mean more to me than your manners. Welcome to our ranks, Isbel.
Isbel sat in one of their wagons and shut her tired eyes. Her long grey hair seemed to flutter ever so slightly, though there was neither wind nor breeze.
Mom, it's good you're here. We ought to speak.
Yes? Concerning what?
I've spent time with your troops, dressing their wounds, treating them. They respect you greatly, would follow you into any fire, any flood.
Happy to hear it. They're good folk, one and all.
Yes, precisely. In fact, too good to die in a senseless war.
Not certain I understand.
The Imperial army's enormous. Just how enormous we know, both. Had you all the North's kings at your side, victory would still be unsure. Yet you fight alone. Know well you cannot rely on them.
Agreed. Nilfgaard's far better equipped and greatly outnumbers us. Yet, though try, they cannot be everywhere at once. They've stretched their forces thin, too thin. An error I aim to exploit.
You may be right. I hope you are. The lives of those you lead depend on it. You're proud, persistent, and sure of yourself. Just as I was at your age. It may work in your favor. Only time can tell. Meanwhile, how might I help?
You're no village witch, no healer. That much is clear. But nor do you look like our northern sorceresses.
I use no glamour, true. I've come to feel a body must age, and honestly so, as nature intended, as is the order of things.
You sound much like a druid drivelling on about balance, harmony, the good that is rot.
Rather poor, their reputation, druids. Yet they're in the right in this regard, I believe. Defy nature's laws, and nothing good can come of it.
Is that also why you wear no shoes?
No. I simply like to feel the grass between my toes, the sand, the mud. You must try it sometime.
I shall think on it. Thank you, Isbel. Duty calls. I must go.
Of course. Should you need me, I'll be here.
Meve shook her head in disbelief as she surveyed the landscape before her. The Nilfgaardians had destroyed everything in their path. Burned farms, trampled fields, leveled orchards.
The bastards!
She hissed.
They mean to cause a famine.
When the Lyrians reached Braithwaite, a small village near Aldersberg, they saw gaunt men and women, more bone than flesh, gnawing on acorns and boot leather. The invaders had requisitioned every scrap of the village's food stores and hauled it off to their nearby camp. In strained voices, the villagers begged the Queen to help them retrieve their supplies.
Milady, Frost'll come before we know it. They'll help us. Why not a soul will live to see the thaw?
Meve looked around at the blackened, scorched village, at the walking skeletons who dwelled in it. The suffocating smoke bellowing up from the fields sent tears streaming down her face.
I'll do what I can,
was all she said. She knew this was not the time for a rousing speech. She needed to act. The Lyrians reached the outer defenses of the camp where the Nilfgaardians had taken Braithwaite's food stores. Rayla delivered her report.
3 heavy infantry regiments, Nazari arbalists,
the warrior said.
And I heard neighing, so they've cavalry as well.
Meve said nothing, working it over in her head. The fate of the starving villagers weighed on her heart. But was it worth risking heavy losses to aid them?
The Nilfgaardians keep food in storage and watch it rot while peasants perish from hunger. Will we allow this?
the Queen said, addressing her soldiers. Cried the soldiers.
I didn't think so.
Meve said with a smile as she drew her weapon.
Lyrians, attack! Today our swords shall taste Imperial blood.
Your Grace, the battle's won. We've secured the storehouses.
Meve managed to rout the Nilfgaardian troops and regain the stolen supplies. However, the Queen's good humor faded soon after the battle. Her soldiers began loudly demanding she not return to the village, but keep the food for her troops.
We've nigh empty bellies too, my lady. And whatever we give them, the black-clad bastards will just steal right back. Better to strengthen our own army than the enemy's.
Easy it would have been to take offense at the soldier's words, to accuse him of greed. But his words held much merit. Meve's army had no less need for the food than the peasants, and in war-ravaged Aedirn there were few chances to replenish their supplies. After a moment's hesitation, the Queen announced her decision.
We shall divide the food. Half we return to the peasants, half we keep for ourselves.
At first, the peasants were glad to see the soldiers, but their joy quickly turned to anger when they found Meve had decided to return only half the recovered supplies.
And for the Queen to stoop so low, robbing good folk, starving good folk.
Meve refused to argue with the villagers. Yes, justice was on their side, but in times of war, justice counts for little.
A thief who takes half your coin is just as much a thief as one who takes it all. Remember these words well.
Meve's mount reared and flattened its ears, spooked for no visible cause. Trusting in animal instinct, Meve jumped to the ground and felt tremors under her boots. At first they were faint, barely palpable, then grew stronger and stronger.
What's going on?
Meve cried.
Why does the earth tremble?
Before anyone could respond, a scout from the forward guard let out a terrified cry. A moment later, snapped trees crashed down around them, and out of the woods came a 30-foot-tall stone giant.
Gods,
whispered the Queen.
What is that?
A golem.
Isbel whispered back.
Favorite servant of Nilfgaardian mages.
As if to confirm his words, soldiers marched out from behind the giant, clad in heavy black plate. Their leader, however, wore but a light tunic, and his hands glowed with a strange blue light.
Dithen Quan and Lyrian!
He shouted, giving the order to attack.
Gloire and Ard Feyin!
My powers are yours.
Adart!
Mom, break the mage's spell, and the golem's power will wane to naught.
Your Grace, it worked!
Raising her shield against the whistling rain of arrows, Meve fought her way towards the Nilfgaardian mage leading the attack. At close quarters, magic arcana would stand no chance against a well-swung blade.
Yeah!
Meve roared, delivering a powerful blow. Her blade severed the mage's aorta, and drowning in his own blood, he fell to the ground. He choked out by way of last words. Then the blue aura coming from his hands flickered out, and the stone giant thundered to the ground in pieces. When the dust of the battle had settled, the Queen ordered her men to search the Nilfgaardian camp. In the mage's tent, they found a rare instrument used to communicate at a distance, a megascope. The crystals encrusted in its brass frame were still warm, meaning it had recently been used to conduct a conversation. The burning question was, with whom?
Isbel!
Yelled the Queen. The mage dutifully came closer.
This device. Could you activate it?
Yes, Your Grace. But are you sure
I am. Get to work.
Isbel nodded, then began calibrating the magic device. Finally, something clicked. A light flickered on, and before Meve's eyes appeared the outline of a Nilfgaardian general.
Speak common, please. I know not your tongue.
Oh, forgive me. I thought I spoke to someone else. Good to see you in good health, Queen. Or ex-Queen, I suppose, would be the more apt title.
Instead of fretting so much over my title, give yours.
Of course. Where are my manners? Duke Adel Ebdahi, Grand Chancellor, Commander of Army Group East. I believe you've heard of me.
No. This is the first time I hear the name Ardel. Ardel what?
I see you've a poor mind for names. Perhaps you should ask your son. He knows me very well.
You Horton.
Oh, what was I thinking? You're not on good terms, are you? Such a sad story. But don't worry, it'll soon be over.
Is that a threat?
No. A simple prediction. Enough of this. Why use this megascope? What is it you want?
I wanted to see the man who's butchering Aedirn. The man responsible for the deaths of thousands of women, elders and children.
Then your desire has been satisfied. It was I who gave the order to cleanse this land of unwanted elements, to prepare it for settlement, for...
Unwanted elements? Those are living folk you speak of.
If you were to look at this war in historical perspective, considering the wider geopolitical context, forget it. It's impossible for you to grasp. Farewell, Your Majesty. Or rather, till next time. For there will be a next time, I assure you.
A quiet fell over the tent. The Queen stepped outside, squinted her eyes against the glare of the burning fields, and swore to herself that when she did see Grand Chancellor Adel Ebdahi again, he would be a whole head shorter. Coming across a small brook, Meve ordered her soldiers to replenish their water supplies. When they returned, it was with empty water skins and troubled expressions.
Milady, the water tastes of blood. Not like black pudding, mind, but rancid, filthy.
Meve had no choice but to march on. She gulped dryly and wondered how to interpret this strange event. An omen, perhaps? A warning from the gods? She soon learned the truth. Following the brook upstream, the Lyrians arrived at a small pool. Bobbing on its surface were dozens of corpses. A young woman caught Meve's gaze, her long hair spread delicately atop the water, wide-open eyes reflecting the sky, a fine nose peppered with freckles, and a gaping wound slashed across her throat.
We shall stop here,
the Queen said calmly,
and give these souls a proper burial. Reynard, send scouts. Tell them they are not to return until they ascertain what has happened here.
When the scouts returned a while later, they brought with them a barefooted peasant they'd found hiding in the woods. They claimed he hailed from Horton, a nearby village, the village whose inhabitants had been murdered.
Them black-clad wretches stormed the village, milady. The devil free gave at the fore. Rounded us right up, took us down to the lake. Whole village, mind. Then chop, chop, and splosh, splosh. 'Twas I alone gave him the slip.
Meve listened to the man's tale, then placed him in the care of her medics and ordered the Lyrians to break camp. She rode at the head of their column, Reynard at her side, her knuckles gripped white on the reins.
Do we know where this Frigef is stationed?
Our riders report he's pitched camp to the east.
Then let's pay him a call.
They killed all, like Rosberg. My lady, please, make them pay. Milka, Bezrad, Kristan, all killed. Souls snuffed out to the very last.
The Lyrians had no trouble finding Frigef's camp. It was the size of a sprawling town. Meve stopped her caravan and called for a council. The first to speak was Reynard.
Seems our scouts were both right and wrong, Your Grace. They did pinpoint General Frigef, the Butcher of Horton. Unfortunately, they underestimated his detachment. It is much larger and better armed than our own.
That changes nothing,
Meve said, forestalling all protest.
If I leave him unpunished, without so much as an attempt, I shall never be able to face my reflection again. We must attack.
Reynard bowed and passed the order to the Lyrians. Later that same day, Meve and Frigef's forces stood face to face on the field of battle.
Come out, Frigef! It's time you pay for your crimes!
You are dogs! There! Frigef! I see him! We've got to catch him!
The Lyrians won the day, despite their foe's distinct advantage. Historians later ascribed Meve's victory to her light troops' superior maneuverability in the difficult terrain compared to the plate-clad Nilfgaardians. But if you ask me, that wasn't it at all. A storm of fury had been quietly gathering in the Lyrians' hearts, a squall of rage stoked by the Nilfgaardians' unparalleled cruelty towards the conquered. And no one embodied this barbarism more perfectly than General Frigef. Meve's men were ready to sacrifice anything to see him punished. They dragged the defeated general before Meve. The Queen wished to learn why he'd ordered the execution of an entire village, how the Nilfgaardians could possibly justify such a crime.
2 weeks prior, I'd sent a detachment to Horton to procure feed. Captain Gaynor commanded it. While he was verifying their grain stores, they barricaded him in the barn and put it to flame.
The Queen listened to the general's story, her face a mask, betraying nothing.
Murdered. One man was murdered.
Frigef raised his eyes to Meve's. The Queen was surprised to see them wet with tears.
Yes, my lady. My son.
The general's simple words bore pain, grief, and a thirst for revenge that would never be slaked. The Queen had to decide what to do with Frigef. No doubt the general had earned punishment, the harshest possible at that. Yet, such a weighty personage could fetch a hefty ransom, and Meve's army desperately needed the gold. In the end, the Queen decided to return the general for a golden ransom. Whether she chose the path out of mercy, moved by the Nilfgaardians' tears, or out of pure material calculation, sensing an excellent chance to replenish her war chest, it is hard to say. One thing is certain, her men were crestfallen at the news. They had challenged Frigef's greatly superior forces in the name of justice, not gold. Meve's Lyrians were traversing a wood when they heard the loud, drawn-out blast of a horn.
One of our scouts?
The Queen asked, clearly perplexed. She turned in her saddle to face Reynard, who shook his head.
Strange. Gascon, appoint a few of your strays, ones who know how to blend in. Have them sniff out who blows that horn, and why.
The scouts returned a short while later with their report. Soldiers had pitched camp in a nearby meadow. They wore Aedirnian uniforms, cut by sashes bearing a golden sun. They addressed their leader as Fulberson.
Know the name,
Rayla said.
Fulberson went over to the enemy first day of the war, took his whole division with him. Your Grace, a chance like this won't come again. Let's teach the traitors a lesson.
We must send a strong signal, one all the North will hear. From the Yaruga to the Dragon Mountains,
announced the Queen.
Whoever collaborates with the invader shall pay with his head. Prepare to attack.
Rayla nodded, clearly pleased. The Lyrians surrounded the meadow marked by their scouts. Moments later, a flaming arrow pierced the sky, giving the signal to attack.
Is that Queen Meve? To arms!
101, 102, 103.
This man has suffered much.
Mercy, your grace. We surrender.
The traitors, perhaps used to fighting unsuspecting foes, stood no chance against the determined Lyrian attack. At its conclusion, Meve personally knocked Fulberson off his mount, then tore off his visor. The face she saw evoked more sympathy than hatred. Fulberson was an old, sickly man, his skin pale and blemished. With great difficulty, he pulled himself up on his knees, then extended a shaky hand in pleading.
Your grace, have mercy. The Nilfgaardians forced me to treason. They threatened torture.
Meve felt her soldiers' eyes on her. They awaited her decision. How would she treat this traitor? Would she really execute him as a warning to others?
I hereby dissolve your division, Fulberson. And you, surrender your sword and be on your way.
The traitor threw himself at the Queen's feet.
You've shown mercy befitting a truly great ruler, your grace. 1,000 thanks. To the south of here lie my lands. Visit me. I shall throw a sumptuous feast in your honor and provide a generous donation to your fight against our common foe.
Meve ordered Fulberson to stand. Her Lyrians reluctantly stepped out of the departing traitor's way. When he passed Black Rayla, she spat at his feet. Meve and her Lyrians arrived at Fulberson's lands, home of the traitor she had let live. He greeted the Queen with full honors. In ceremonial garb, a platter of bread and salt held aloft.
Your grace, 'tis an honor to welcome you to my humble abode. Please, come inside. A fattened piglet already turns on the spit. Soon I shall fetch my best wines from the cellar.
Meve, having lived on nothing but salt pork and gruel for weeks, was tempted to accept the offer. Black Rayla, however, was strongly against it.
Ma'am, forgive my insolence, but to eat from a traitor's table is foolish. Don't do it.
Heeding Rayla's plea, the Queen declined Fulberson's invitation. Clearly saddened, he escorted the Queen to the bounds of his estate.
I thank you once more, your grace,
he said, bending to kiss her hand.
And I swear from now on, I shall support the North as best I can.
Meve nodded, then went on her way. She wondered whether the old man would keep his word, or, as soon as the Lyrians disappeared over the horizon, once again don an imperial crested sash.
"'Tis a great pity your grace hasn't time to feast with us."
As Meve passed the city of Harmelin, one of the peasants she'd saved from Nilfgaardian captivity requested an audience.
Be taking leave of you here, my lady. Folk from our parts lives in Harmelin. We'll manage. But, my lady, we thank you for taking pity on us, time and again. We've nothing, my lady, or near's enough. Black-clad bastards took all's worth taking. Except in this amulet. Been in my family for ages, kept us from harm. May it do the same for you.
Meve wanted to say she did not believe in peasant superstitions, but when she took the ivory pendant in hand, she felt a curious warmth from it. The peasant bowed, then joined the others as they trod off towards Harmelin. The Lyrians stood within 5 miles of Aldersberg, when the road, which until now they had travelled alone, suddenly filled with all manner of folk. Peasants, merchants, and wounded fighters in tattered uniforms. They trod solemnly in the opposite direction, their worldly possessions on their backs.
Aldersberg's fallen, my lady.
Sighed one of the refugees with a forlorn shrug.
Outer walls breached. King still defends the old town, but black-clad goats are winning. You'd best turn back before it's too late.
We've nowhere to turn to, good man.
The Queen said, then spurred on her horse.
Follow me!
The Queen galloped so fast the wind squeezed tears from her eyes, the Lyrian cavalry close at her heels. Hoofbeats thundered down the high road, and the crowd of refugees parted, making a path for the charging riders.
Faster! Faster!
Soon they set eye on Aldersberg. A red glow filled the horizon, the wind carried screams and the clanking of steel. The once proud city was quickly turning to dust in the Nilfgaardian sun. The Nilfgaardian force moved to block the Lyrians' way. Without slowing, Meve cut down the infantryman who tried to drag her from her saddle with a hook. Her head in a winged helmet fell to the ground, leaving a bloody track.
Lyrians! Attack!
Meve shouted.
Take no prisoners! Bloody hell! You shan't stop me. Not now!
Your Grace, that was but their rear guard.
The Lyrians managed to scatter the Nilfgaardian battalion, one of many besieging Aldersberg. Their scouts brought before the Queen a prisoner freed from the invaders. Meve inquired about the situation in the city.
Turned a right slaughterhouse it has. The Imperials, they... King had the city cleared, my lady, but didn't budge himself. Holding out with his guard in Old Town, walls still standing there. Said he'd fight to the end, come what may.
Meve weighed her options. The situation looked dire. Demavend, to whom she had come for help, needed help himself. Nilfgaard enjoyed an overwhelming advantage. The small Lyrian detachment stood no chance of breaking the siege. But to retreat, surrender, that was not something Meve did.
The Nilfgaardians do not expect a relief force. Rayla, you know Aldersberg. Can you lead us by side streets to the Old Town, that we may avoid the largest part of the Nilfgaardian army?
The warrior nodded, and without waiting for any further orders, strode out in front of the party. Reynard followed her with his gaze, clearly troubled.
And what then, Your Majesty? We burst into the lion's den and...
And we pray the lion chokes. Follow me!
Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries!
Gods have mercy. And demons take it all!
Taking advantage of the confusion, Meve maneuvered her troops to the very walls of the Old Town. Spying Lyrian banners, the defenders suspected a trap. But when they noticed Black Rayla among them, they immediately lowered the drawbridge. The Old Town was a maze of brothels and shady taverns. In normal times, students and other pleasure seekers prowled its dark alleys. Now, tired soldiers slumped in every corner, though the Lyrians' arrival clearly buoyed their spirits. The Fraternal Realm's warriors clasped each other's hands and swapped tales. Even Aedirn's king, Demavend, made no secret of his pleasure at seeing these unexpected arrivals.
Meve! Of all the besieged cities in all the world, you walk into mine. Come to the rescue, have you?
To be quite frank, I've come to be rescued.
Oh, yes. I've heard much of the events in Lyria. Disgraceful! Such betrayal! However, as you might have noticed, things are none too rosy here either.
Yes, that is hard to miss.
I thought we'd trade blows with the Blackclads. That it would be an even match. 2 weeks. That sufficed to annihilate the army I'd spent my whole lifetime building.
Your Majesty, I cannot say what fate will bring, if we shall reach this war's end alive. But I wish to say now that I admire you.
Oh?
You evacuated the city, yet refused to evacuate yourself. You fight to the bitter end, like a hero.
But of course, a king must lead by example after all. Especially in war.
Reynard, that rumbling, you hear it? Studded boots on cobblestones. The Nilfgaardians. Prepare the men for battle.
Yes, Your Grace.
So, now that we're alone, what's really going on?
What? Did you not hear? I'm defending my capital, like a hero.
Demavend, please, don't feed me that drivel. We've known each other far too long. Why did you stay?
Meve. As meddling as you are beautiful. See that building? That one there.
The brothel? The Crimson Bodice?
Precisely. So, but promise not to laugh. I'm a patron. A loyal one, in fact. One of the girls there, Demeretta. She's marvelous. Makes me feel young again.
A young fool, you mean? Demavend, there's a war on, and...
Allow me to finish. Demeretta became, well, with child. Exactly 9 months ago. Understand now?
She's entered confinement. Having contractions.
Since yesterday. You see, I cannot leave her like this. Can't have her moved. I must stay put until she gives birth.
And then what? Pray tell. Invite all of Nilfgaard to the christening?
No, my dear. There is a hidden tunnel deep beneath the city, leading far beyond its walls. Once the midwives cut the cord, we flee.
Demavend, you risk the lives of thousands of men for a single child? For a bastard to boot?
Meve, I would kill thousands of men for my child. Born in wedlock or out, it changes nothing.
It changes everything. One way the babe inherits the throne, the other...
You argue succession while I speak of a father's love. But I shouldn't expect you to understand. Your heart, ice through and through, always has been. No wonder, villain.
Your Majesties, the Nilfgaardians are attacking.
Meve, we must hold out. A few hours, that's all.
I'll do what I can. Defend the king! We must stop them!
Meve! They're getting close! Devils take all, help me!
Hey?
Meve! We must hold on a bit longer!
No! Chase!
Ha ha ha! It worked! Now retreat to the tunnel!
With their forces combined, the rulers managed to hold the old town long enough for Demeretta to bear the king's offspring, a healthy, hardy boy. When the midwife slapped the infant, his scream carried above the roar of battle. Soon afterwards, the defenders abandoned the walls and left the city through a secret tunnel. The Nilfgaardians, furious that not one but 2 northern sovereigns were among the escapees, razed Aldersberg to the ground.
Thank you. If not for you, the devils would have devoured us.
I should say it was nothing. But the truth is, I need your aid.
Aid? But you see, my army is no more. I must pull back, regroup.
Pull back? Where to? The golden sun flies over your entire realm.
To Redania, to take shelter at the court there.
And then? Will you sit and watch the fool juggle apples as Nilfgaard parcels all Aedirn out to its settlers?
Meve, one must know when to fold and when to double down. Nilfgaard has stretched the front. Winter will soon be here. Let the costs claw away at them. A year, 2, then we strike. and we shall prove the Empire is a colossus with feet of clay.
You're a coward, Demavend. A common coward.
Perhaps so. But mind, courage alone wins no wars. Soldiers do. And Nilfgaard simply has many more.
I can't live like that.
So what shall you do instead?
Fight on. Until I win. Or the black-clad curs tear me apart.
Gods, such pity I have for your husband. The poor man must have had a rough go of it.
He seemed content with his life while it lasted. Yet I'm serious, Demavend, in my request. You truly won't aid me. Provide nothing at all.
I will tell my men whoever so wishes can join your party and fight on. But please, curb your excitement. They are tired. Few will choose the path of greater resistance. But, are you familiar with the saying, when at wit's end, a dwarf's your friend?
Yes, it and many others. Yet as much as I appreciate folk wisdom, I prefer facts to philosophy at the moment. Preferably facts relevant to my situation.
How about this? Mahakam is but a week's ride from here. And there you'll find thousands of dwarves armed to the teeth. Enough to turn the tides of this war, I venture.
Yes, they could. If not for another fact. That the dwarves have always been famously indifferent to strife between humans. They'll never come to my aid. Bah! I doubt they'll even let me into their land.
Unless you show them this. The leaden ring. A token of amity given to me by the Elder-in-Chief. That's not to say they'll welcome you with open arms. But they will hear you out. And that is something.
Dwarven infantry I'd make good use of. I shall do as you say. Or at least try.
Good. And to ease your journey somewhat, I'll give you as your guide the best man, or rather woman, for the task. Rayla!
Yes, Your Grace?
You've been to Mahakam with me many times. You know their paths. Take Queen Meve and her party there.
If it be your wish, my king, I shall obey.
I'll send messengers ahead that the dwarfs may expect your arrival. Until then, good luck, Meve. And may we one day waltz upon the grave of our foe, Emperor Emir.
May it be so. Just as long as I get to lead.
Ah, of course. Farewell.